Judge Judy was poised to utter 8 devastating words that would dismantle a $100 million religious empire and leave America's most cherished prosperity preacher, Joel Osteen, utterly speechless for 45 excruciating seconds on live television. An incident that would swiftly ignite the most shocking scandal in daytime TV history and unearth a buried secret recording that prosperity gospel figures had fought relentlessly to conceal for years. Joel Osteen confidently entered Judge Judy's courtroom that Tuesday morning, fully convinced he could effortlessly charm his way through what appeared to be a trivial case concerning an elderly widow's donation, entirely unaware that he was walking into an elaborate, meticulously prepared trap designed to shatter his credibility before 12 million viewers and irrevocably alter the landscape of American Christianity. Margaret Thompson, a 73-year-old widow, had initiated the seemingly simple lawsuit after donating her entire $85,000 retirement fund to Joel's Lakewood church based on the promise that her seed offering would be returned, multiplied, within a single year, and when the promised miracle money failed to appear, leaving her facing eviction, she sued. A move Joel's legal team was certain would be an easy public relations win: show up, smile, discuss faith and blessings, portray the old woman as bitter and lacking faith, and depart looking like a man of God unjustly persecuted, as they had mistakenly concluded, after studying Judge Judy's prior religious dispute cases, that she would show deference toward a prominent pastor, a catastrophic misjudgment, as Joel was ignorant of the fact that Judge Judy had been quietly assembling a case against prosperity preachers for several months, with her producers having already accumulated over 300 comparable complaints from victims of prosperity gospel schemes, and Judge Judy herself had devoted weeks to meticulously examining the financial operations of megachurch pastors, leading her to uncover something explosive: a clandestine audio recording originating from Joel's own leadership meetings that irrefutably demonstrated he was perfectly aware of the calculated harm he was inflicting upon vulnerable individuals. A recording that was not merely damaging but utterly devastating, as it captured Joel audibly laughing at the desperation of his neediest donors while actively strategizing on methods to extract even more money from grieving families. The instant Joel stepped into her courtroom, Judge Judy realized she had secured him exactly where she wanted him, signaling that this would not be a typical religious arbitration case but, rather, the public dismantling of the prosperity gospel's most recognizable figure. And as the cameras rolled and 12 million Americans tuned in expecting standard courtroom theatrics, they had no clue they were about to witness the most brutal theological takedown in the history of television, where Joel Osteen, the man famous for his perpetual smile, was about to be exposed for something far more sinister than anyone had ever imagined. This story revolves around those 8 critical words that rendered Joel Osteen completely silent for 45 seconds before millions of viewers, the exact contents of that secret recording which prosperity gospel leaders fought so desperately to suppress, and the reason why this single courtroom showdown resulted in congressional hearings, FBI investigations, and the largest mass departure from megachurches in American history, revealing the saga of the day America's toughest judge challenged America's richest preacher and unveiled a truth so ruinous that 3 major networks initially refused to broadcast the footage, deeming it too incendiary for daytime television, a confrontation that would shatter Joel's meticulously constructed image, expose the concealed financial mechanism of the prosperity gospel, and prove that true justice sometimes emerges not from a church pulpit, but from a Brooklyn judge who refuses to permit anyone, even America's most beloved pastor, to get away with defrauding desperate people out of their last dollars. If you believe you know the ending of this story, you are mistaken, because what Judge Judy ultimately uncovered about Joel Osteen was significantly worse than anyone had suspected, and the evidence she was concealing would send shockwaves throughout the religious community that are still reverberating today. If you are prepared to see America's toughest judge challenge prosperity theology and expose the secret recordings that confirm these preachers are fully aware of the exploitation they inflict on vulnerable people, hit that subscribe button now, because this confrontation will challenge everything you think you know about faith, money, and the dark reality behind America's most lucrative churches. What you are about to witness didn't merely ruin one man's reputation, it brought down an entire industry constructed upon empty promises and shattered hopes. 3 weeks prior to the confrontation, Margaret Thompson sat in her cramped studio apartment, an eviction notice clutched in her trembling hands, the 73-year-old widow having given every asset she owned to Joel's ministry after watching him pledge on television that seed offerings would return multiplied within a year, an act following the death of her husband from cancer. which left her with overwhelming medical debt and profound grief. And when Joel looked directly into the camera, proclaiming that God wished to bless faithful givers with supernatural abundance, Margaret interpreted it as her final recourse, emptying her retirement account, withdrawing her life insurance payout, and sending every cent of her $85,000 to Lakewood Church, desperately believing that God would multiply it back just in time to save her home. The multiplication, however, never arrived, and instead, she received only a generalized thank you letter and a plastic bookmark bearing Joel's smiling face. And when she contacted the church to explain her plight, a staff member informed her that her lack of a financial breakthrough signified insufficient faith. Now, 9 months later, she was facing homelessness while the man who took her money resided in a $10.5 million mansion and traveled the nation in private jets. And Margaret's story was not unique, as she was one of thousands financially ruined by prosperity gospel assurances that never materialized. Meanwhile, 1,400 miles away in Houston, Joel Osteen was reviewing his quarterly financial reports in his lavish office, overlooking the former Compaq Center that housed his 16,800-seat sanctuary, where the numbers were astonishing, as Lakewood Church generated over $70 million annually, with the vast majority coming from small contributions made by elderly, desperate, and financially struggling believers who gave sacrificially because they believed God would reward their faith with earthly wealth. What Margaret and millions of others were unaware of was that Joel's inner circle routinely discussed the psychological tactics employed to extract maximum donations from their most vulnerable audience members. The secret recording that would eventually demolish Joel's empire was made during one of these private leadership meetings, just 2 months before Margaret's case, capturing Joel discussing donation strategies with a chilling lack of compassion. The people who give the most are usually the ones who can afford it the least. His voice was clearly captured on the audio. Desperate people make faithful givers. We just need to keep them believing that their breakthrough is always one more seed away. When a board member expressed concern about elderly individuals donating their life savings, Joel's response was chilling: their faith is their choice. Our job is to provide them with opportunities to express that faith financially. Judge Judy's producers obtained this recording from a former Lakewood insider who had become disgusted by the ministry's predatory actions, a whistleblower who had personally witnessed Joel reviewing lists of the church's poorest donors, specifically targeting widows and retirees with customized fundraising letters that manipulated their desperation and grief. The insider provided documentation showing that Joel's team maintained comprehensive psychological profiles of vulnerable donors, noting their financial status, family tragedies, and emotional triggers to maximize their giving potential. When Margaret's case reached Judge Judy's desk, the veteran judge instantly recognized it as a chance to expose the systematic exploitation she had been investigating, understanding that this was not merely about one widow's lost savings, but about a multi-million-dollar operation that deliberately targeted America's most vulnerable citizens with fraudulent religious promises designed to extract their last dollars. Judge Judy had dedicated her career to protecting people from scammers and con artists, and she recognized that Joel Osteen was operating one of the most sophisticated religious confidence schemes in American history. The trap had been set, but Joel had no idea he was walking into an ambush that would expose not only his greed, but his calculated cruelty toward the very people who trusted him most. The moment Joel Osteen stepped into Judge Judy's courtroom that Tuesday morning, his characteristic confident smile began to fade, as the usual courtroom setting felt different, with Judge Judy seated behind her bench radiating an intensity that unnerved even experienced attorneys, and her gaze tracked Joel's every movement with a predatory focus. What Joel failed to notice was the thick manila folder prominently placed on her desk, filled with documents that would soon dismantle everything he had built, as his legal team had wrongly assured him this would be a simple case about religious donations and freedom of faith, easily dismissed with his usual charisma and theological evasions, and they were about to discover how utterly wrong they were. Judge Judy wasted no time on formalities, her opening remarks cutting through the courtroom like a razor. Mr. Osteen, before we discuss this case, I want to establish something very clearly. You are not in your church. You are not on your television show, and you are not surrounded by people who hang on your every word. You are in my courtroom where the only thing that matters is truth, evidence, and facts. Do you understand that? Joel's smile remained frozen, but the cameras caught a slight tremor in his hands as he replied, "Yes, Your Honor, of course." Judge Judy's retort was immediate and cutting. "Good, because I've been looking forward to this conversation for a very long time. Margaret Thompson was the first to take the stand, her voice barely audible as she recounted donating her life savings to Joel's ministry, and as she spoke of her husband's death, her financial desperation, and her belief that God would multiply her seed offering. Joel maintained his practiced expression of pastoral concern. However, Judge Judy observed his micro-expressions, discerning what the cameras could not, the thinly veiled impatience and calculation beneath his sympathetic facade. When Margaret concluded her tearful testimony, Judge Judy's voice became perilously quiet. "Mrs. Thompson, did anyone from Lakewood Church ever explain to you the statistical probability of your donation being returned multiplied?" Margaret's confused reply unveiled the core of the deception. "Your Honor," Pastor Joel said, "faith wasn't about statistics. It was about believing in God's promises." Judge Judy's eyes immediately locked onto Joel. "Mr. Osteen, is that what you told her? That faith isn't about statistics?" Joel's response was smooth and rehearsed. "Your Honor, faith is indeed about trusting in God's provision and believing in His desire to bless His children abundantly." It was the exact kind of religious rhetoric that typically deflected awkward questions about his financial dealings, but Judge Judy was not typical. "That's very interesting, Mr. Osteen," Judge Judy replied with dangerous composure, "because I have some statistics I'd like to share with you." She opened the manila folder and pulled out the first document. "According to financial records subpoenaed from your church, Lakewood receives approximately $70 million annually in donations. Of that $70 million, how much would you estimate is returned to donors as the multiplied blessings you promise?" Joel's practiced smile flickered for the first time. "Your Honor, God's blessings come in many forms, not always financial." Judge Judy's response landed like a hammer blow. "That's not what I asked you. I asked you for a number. How much money goes back to the people who give it to you?" The courtroom fell silent as Joel struggled to formulate a non-incriminating response, having been prepared by his lawyers for theological questions, not cold financial audits. "Your Honor, our church operates transparently according to all federal guidelines for religious organizations." Judge Judy leaned forward with her signature death stare. "Mr. Osteen, you're evading my question. Let me help you with the math. According to your own financial disclosures, less than 3% of donations are ever returned to donors in any form. That means Mrs. Thompson had less than a 3% chance of seeing her money again. But you told her to have faith in God's multiplication. Doesn't that strike you as misleading?" Joel's answer revealed the first weakness in his defense. "Your Honor, faith requires stepping out beyond what statistics might suggest." Judge Judy instantly pounced. "So, you're admitting you know the statistics are against your donors, but you encourage them to ignore those statistics and give anyway." The theological trap was perfectly sprung, and Joel walked right into it. "Your Honor, I believe God can do miracles that transcend human understanding," he replied, though his voice lacked its usual conviction. Judge Judy produced a second document from her folder. "Mr. Osteen, I'm holding a list of your church's top 100 donors from last year. 97 of them are over the age of 65, 63 are widows, and 41 are living on fixed incomes below $30,000 annually. These are the people funding your $10.5 million mansion and your private jets. Does that seem miraculous to you, or does that seem predatory?" The question hung in the air like a lethal weapon, and for the first time since entering the courtroom, Joel Osteen was utterly speechless. The audience sensed the immediate shift in power as America's most adored prosperity preacher was pitted against America's toughest judge, and Judge Judy was far from finished. What she was about to pull from that manila folder next would forever shatter Joel's carefully constructed image. Judge Judy reached further into her manila folder and retrieved a photograph that made Joel's face visibly turn pale. "Mr. Osteen, do you recognize this?" She held up an aerial shot of his $10.5 million River Oaks mansion, complete with its swimming pool, tennis court, and 6-car garage. "This is your primary residence, correct?" Joel's voice cracked slightly. "Yes, Your Honor, but I want to clarify that." Judge Judy cut him off with surgical precision. "No clarifications needed. Mrs. Thompson, how many months of rent could you have paid with the $85,000 you gave to fund this mansion?" Margaret's tearful answer was devastating. "About 7 years, Your Honor." The undeniable mathematical cruelty of the comparison hit the courtroom like a physical blow. Yet Judge Judy had more. Mr. Osteen, you also own a vacation home in Colorado worth $2.9 million, correct? And a collection of luxury vehicles, including a Ferrari, 2 Mercedes, and a Bentley. Joel desperately attempted to regain control. Your Honor, God has blessed our ministry with resources that allow us to reach more people. Judge Judy's interruption was explosive. Stop it. Just stop it right there. You're not reaching people. You're reaching into their wallets. The courtroom erupted with gasps as Judge Judy's fury was unleashed. Mrs. Thompson, while you were choosing between medication and groceries, this man was choosing between his Ferrari and his Bentley. Does that sound like God's plan to you? Margaret shook her head, openly weeping, and Joel's desperation became palpable as his carefully constructed image rapidly crumbled. Your Honor, I never asked Mrs. Thompson to give beyond her means. She made that choice herself. It was the worst possible defense he could have offered, and Judge Judy's eyes flashed with pure rage. She made that choice. After you looked into television cameras and promised her that God would multiply her seed offering? After your ministry sent her personalized letters telling her that bigger faith required bigger giving? She pulled out yet another document. Mr. Osteen, this is a direct quote from one of your televised sermons. The size of your seed determines the size of your harvest. God is looking for people who will give sacrificially to prove their faith. You said that while sitting in front of a golden backdrop wearing a $3,000 suit. Joel's final, pathetic attempt at defense was, Your Honor, I believe God wants to bless his children abundantly. Judge Judy leaned forward with lethal intensity. Then answer me this, Mr. Osteen. If God wants all his children blessed abundantly, why are you the only one in this courtroom who got abundantly blessed? Where's Mrs. Thompson's abundance? Where are the blessings for the thousands of elderly people who funded your lifestyle while they eat cat food to survive? The question annihilated whatever composure Joel had remaining, and his trademark smile completely vanished as he sat frozen, unable to counter the irrefutable logic of Judge Judy's attack. The cameras captured every second of his mental collapse as America watched their beloved prosperity preacher exposed as nothing more than a sophisticated con artist who had built an empire on the desperation of vulnerable people. But Judge Judy was not finished. What she was about to reveal from that folder would not only destroy Joel's reputation but expose the entire prosperity gospel as a calculated fraud designed solely to exploit the faithful. Judge Judy reached for the final document in her manila folder, but instead of pulling it out, she closed the folder and fixed her stare directly into Joel Osteen's eyes. The courtroom fell into absolute silence as she leaned forward with the intense focus that had made her a legend. Mr. Osteen, I'm going to ask you one simple question, and I want a yes or no answer. No theology, no scripture quotes, no religious double talk, just yes or no. Joel shifted uneasily in his chair, sweat forming on his forehead despite the air conditioning, sensing the trap closing around him with no escape. Judge Judy's voice became deadly quiet, each word carefully measured and precise. Did Jesus die rich or poor? The 8 words struck Joel like a physical blow, his mouth opening and then closing as his mind struggled to process the fundamental theological checkmate he had just walked into. The cameras captured every second of his mental paralysis as 12 million viewers watched America's most successful prosperity preacher realize he had been cornered by the most basic question in Christianity. 5 seconds passed in complete silence, then 10, as Joel looked frantically around the courtroom, searching for a non-existent escape route. 15 seconds. 20. His hands began to visibly shake as the weight of the question crushed his entire theological foundation. 25 seconds. 30. The silence was deafening, and every person in that courtroom understood they were witnessing the real-time destruction of the prosperity gospel. 35 seconds. 40. Joel's breathing grew labored as he stared at Judge Judy, completely unable to form any words. Finally, after 45 agonizing seconds that seemed like an eternity, Joel whispered, his voice barely audible through his microphone, He died poor. The admission sent shockwaves through the courtroom and across America, and Judge Judy's response was swift and devastating. Then why are you telling people that following Jesus will make them rich? Joel's empire had just collapsed with 8 simple words that exposed the fundamental lie at the heart of prosperity theology. If you can't believe what you just witnessed, smash that subscribe button because Judge Judy's final verdict will leave you speechless, too. Judge Judy's verdict was swift and entirely merciless. Mr. Osteen, you are ordered to return Mrs. Thompson's entire $85,000 immediately, plus $50,000 in punitive damages for emotional distress caused by your predatory religious practices. Joel sat in stunned silence as she continued her devastating assault. Furthermore, I'm recommending this case to the FBI for investigation into possible mail fraud and racketeering under the RICO Act. You've been running a religious Ponzi scheme and it ends today. The courtroom erupted as cameras captured Joel's complete humiliation, and his legal team frantically whispered damage control strategies, but the footage was already spreading across social media like wildfire. Within 30 minutes, Did Jesus Die Rich or Poor was trending worldwide, with the 45-second silence clip being viewed millions of times. Joel's desperate attempt to salvage his reputation utterly failed. Your Honor, I've dedicated my life to helping people find hope and faith, he stammered. Judge Judy's response was brutal. You've dedicated your life to stealing from desperate people while living like a king. Mrs. Thompson will get her money back, but the thousands of other victims of your prosperity gospel scam deserve justice, too. This court hereby orders a full financial audit of Lakewood Church's donor practices. The aftermath was immediate and utterly catastrophic. Joel's empire had been completely demolished by 8 words, and the prosperity gospel would never recover from this public execution. 2 years later, the destruction is complete, with Joel Osteen's empire having crumbled spectacularly. Lakewood Church attendance plummeted by 73%, forcing them to sell the Compaq Center and relocate to a strip mall. Joel's book deals evaporated, his speaking fees vanished, and his television show was cancelled after advertisers fled. The FBI investigation led to congressional hearings exposing the prosperity gospel's predatory practices, resulting in new federal regulations on religious fundraising. Margaret Thompson utilized her settlement to establish the Religious Exploitation Recovery Fund, helping thousands of prosperity gospel victims rebuild their lives. The secret recording Judge Judy possessed was finally played during the congressional hearings, revealing Joel laughing about desperate donors and strategizing how to extract more money from grieving families, an audio clip that destroyed any remaining sympathy for his ministry. Judge Judy's 8 words still echo through churches today: did Jesus die rich or poor? The simple question that exposed the fundamental lie of prosperity theology continues to liberate believers from financial manipulation disguised as faith. If this confrontation opened your eyes to the truth about the prosperity gospel, hit that subscribe button and share this with someone who needs to see it. Tell us in the comments, was Judge Judy right to destroy Joel's empire to protect vulnerable people? Sometimes the most loving thing is exposing the truth that religious leaders don't want you to.